Let's bring in Ambassador Ron Kirk, former U.S. Trade Representative during the Obama administration, and Greg Ip, Chief Economics Commentator at the Wall Street Journal. Gentlemen, good morning. Greg Ip's latest column, by the way, is titled "China Started the Trade War, Not Trump." Ambassador, I want to start with you. There's a big question about how far the Trump administration is willing to push this kind of aggressive stance towards saying, hey, you've got to treat America and American workers the way we see as fair, even if it puts at risk some of these global relationships and trade agreements. Are you concerned with the way the trade rhetoric has heightened, or do you think it could cool down and this could all work out?
Well, since you just heard from Peter Navarro, Carl, I'll let his statements stand on their own. But I do want to make a couple of points, as the other speaker noted. I mean, the United States has been concerned about China's behavior since joining the WTO, and particularly over the last several years, as not only our administration, but I know the Bush administration has consistently pressed China, first of all, to comply with our intellectual property laws, but also to fully open up their markets. And so I don't have any quarrel with the Trump administration continuing to make that case. But I do think the reason you've seen the markets react in such a volatile manner to the recent actions on tariffs is it's generally accepted that tariffs are kind of a blunt tool to achieve that goal. But I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. Let's see how these talks go. I think we've still got another 7 or 8 days before USTR is to release the list of specific goods and the amount of the tariffs that would be targeted. And if there's any way to back away from that, I think that'd be great. But I don't know that we should be that encouraged by China's muted response, because if past is prologue, when China is attacked, they attack back, and they attack back fairly quickly and fairly strategically.
Greg, you make the point that the Trump administration is on firmer ground directly addressing China on these issues than any of the other moves that they've made, perhaps. But I wonder, I mean, will this come down to babies in bathwater? How much bathwater can you get rid of before you lose the baby here on global trade?
Well, absolutely. I mean, in every negotiation or confrontation, it's a matter of who blinks first. But I think that you have a few things on the U.S.'s side. First of all, when Trump came out with the aluminum steel tariffs, you know, he faced basically blowback from everywhere, from Congress, his own party, from business here in the United States, and from trading partners abroad. You have not heard any of that blowback this time around, because there's a consensus here in the United States, in business, and with the U.S.'s trading partners, that China's misbehavior is really unacceptable. So I think there are concerns with some of the fallout from this action, and that will have to be a wait-and-see process. But I think the fundamental thrust of the direction is meeting widespread support.
Hey, Greg, like the Treasury Secretary over the weekend, Navarro tried to push back a little bit on the argument that stocks had been moved by tariffs. In the tariff discussion, he brought up the Fed, just as Mnuchin did. You think they're worried about the markets not liking this?
They probably are a little bit. I actually happen to agree that I don't think trade is the #1 issue that's affecting the markets right now. I think it's probably mostly a little pressure on interest rates and inflation and so forth. Plus, perhaps the market got a little bit ahead of itself. I think it's not specifically this trade action that's worrisome for the markets. It's perhaps the whole tone of the administration, that after a year focused on the agenda of low taxes and less regulation, there's a piece of this agenda which is protectionism, which is a little less favorable to trade. But I don't think this should be basically a uniform source of concern. There's really 2 trade stories going on here: China and everybody else. On China, it's very worrisome. On everybody else, things are looking a little bit better. We've seen the exemptions on steel. One thing that's getting not enough attention is this morning we learned that the United States and Korea apparently have an agreement on how to amend the Korea Free Trade Agreement. So it does look like that on some of these bilateral fronts, tensions are easing.
Greg, I would, if I might jump in, though, I do have to note, I agree with you about how the rest of the world views China. But I can tell you in very frequent conversations and outreach I get from my former colleagues, the world is very concerned about whether or not they can count on the United States to sort of be a standard bearer for the rules-based trading system. And yes, the administration made an accommodation to some of our trading partners on the steel's tariffs, but one of the strong tools we've had in confronting China in the past was a pretty much unified front between the United States and Europe and Japan and Mexico and Canada and others. But because of the factors that you mentioned previously, those countries aren't sure whether or not they can count on the U.S. for that. So, I can tell you the successes that we've had with China in the past, it helps them to save face if they are responding to a global challenge from a number of partners than being in the position where it's just the United States saying you have to do this. And we have to remember President Xi just got the party to agree to allow him to be president for life. So, I mean, he's got his own political dynamic. So again, I would just urge caution at their muted response thus far.
Hey there, thanks for checking out CNBC on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all of the day's biggest stories. You can also click on any of the videos around me to watch the latest from CNBC. Thanks for watching.